joined in the program by Mr. Larry Arogun, that is Executive Director, International Press Center. I was on ground at the Osun State governorship election for literally like a week. Mr. Larry, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Jeffrey.
I hope you found time to breathe, sleep, eat, and rest.
Well, we've tried, and then we have to be here again. It's not over until it's over, right?
You know, I always like to talk to CSOs and all of that because we have similar. We don't have a dog in the fight. The only dog in the fight we have is the process. The politician can debate over who wins and how credible was the entire process. So walk us through what your assessment will be. There are a couple of questions I have in mind, but let's have an overview of what you think and your rating of this exercise from everybody who played a role.
Everybody who played a role. Okay, I think we can start with, I prefer to start with the people. I think the Osun citizens, the voters, made a lot of difference in this particular election. We saw that in many respects. First was the fact that there were a lot of tension before the election due to activities of thugs, killings, threats, and all kinds of intimidation that tended to suggest that people might not come out, but they came out in reasonable numbers and quite early. Secondly, they were very, very political conscious. And I guess that we as civil society can claim, and media can claim some credit for this in terms of the amount of voter education we did before the election, particularly when it comes to citizens taking charge of the process. So what do I mean? And I point out two elements on this. The first was that in some of the polling units where they knew what the regulation was, that the voters list had to be pasted so that people can check their names. And in some places, the lists were not complete. And they demanded for a complete list until the presiding officers, provided them. In some other places, the number of ballot papers that were brought were not up to the number of registered voters that were displayed. In one instance, the number of registered voters was 2,300 and they brought ballot papers for 1,700. They insisted on having the complete number until voting would start. So in some places where voting were delayed, it was not because of late arrival of INEC officials or the material. It was because the citizens were vigilant enough to observe some abnormalities in the process. The second factor in terms of overview, because now that the results have been declared, everybody is claiming credit, and it's normal. Success has many fathers, brothers, uncles, cousins, but when it comes to failure, so everybody is trying to claim credit. But I also look at one factor that has not been talked about: the fact that in this election, the political parties invested properly in their agents, in their party agents, the agents and the polling units. And what do I mean by this? You also saw the party agents asking questions, and obviously they knew what they were doing. So it meant that this time around we didn't have transactional polling agents who were just there for the sake of the money. You had agents who followed the process, and obviously they had all the results in the polling units, and they had already shared this with their parties. And that also helped civil society organizations monitoring the process to capture the entire process. I think we can talk about INEC, and we can say now that there's a kind of continuity in the performance of the INEC resident commissioner for Osun State, Mrs. Olutoyin Babalola, who was in charge in Ondo State, and did everything possible. So we had reasonable arrival of officials and materials in time, even though voting did not commence some places. Beavers performed above 70%, but there were still some technical challenges in some areas. But one other thing was the readiness of INEC in the state to respond, to questions and quickly take charge of, because she kept saying, anything you hear, let us know so that we can, rectify that. And we were impressed with upload of results onto IREF, although there was a 1 hour break at a certain time, which created apprehension. And one would have expected for that kind of delay, for a kind of statement or an explanation to have come out. Because before the election, we kept talking about the importance of crisis, communication. Then the security agents, the deployment was massive, and there wasn't any polling unit that didn't have, some, security, presence, and we can rate their performance as being, good. The question we'll be asking as we go along really is that how it was possible, despite such presence, for some, political thugs to still manage to disrupt the process in Ire, for example, the two polling units in Ogoluwa area, Oshogbo, where ballots box was actually snatched, with people came around firing gunshots into the air and disappearing with the ballot box, or the incidents, in Modakeke and the rest of them. But again, in spite of that, the people still reconverged, and you saw the presence of party supporters at the collation center trying to observe, the process, accompanying the polling officials when they were going to the collation centers on their motorbikes to say that, look, our votes, must count. So that would be my own assessment of the security, agents, and of course, the massive observation of the process by observers, international, local, helped to, constituted a form of oversight over this, process. And as you are aware, at the level of, the civil society network on electoral integrity, under the auspices of the European Union support to democratic governance in Nigeria, we did issue a midday statement where we articulated some of our observations about things that were not right and that should still be corrected as the election moved to the critical stages of vote counting and collation. So this will be my overall summary, and you can then begin to look at your own percentages in terms of who should be given the ultimate credit for what transpired in Osun State. For me, I think it's just the people who displayed a high level of political sophistication. And despite the closeness of the race, the fact that this was a two-horse race, a direct rivalry between Accord Party and the APC, and turning out in large numbers as party supporters, you also didn't see clashes between them, at the polling unit. It was all about the fact that, oh, my vote will count. But I think we should also talk about, in terms of this overview, we cannot overlook, the factor of vote buying or attempted, vote buying. And you saw also what transpired in Osun, in the sense that, first, if you remove the element of vote buying, perhaps this margin would have been different, or maybe we won't have that number. But significantly too, a reasonable number of voters essentially voted their conscience. And you saw that in the kind of songs that were being sung when they saw where victory was going. The fact that you had people, poor people, young people, and we saw them on the streets even as we were returning yesterday. They were everywhere, saying that is shame to money. So for me, what we saw in Osun was the people's will triumphing over vote trading or over giving of money to voters. And if that becomes a trend in Nigeria, it will be very, very wonderful, where people can say, we just don't need this money, let's vote the way we want to vote. Well, we learned that some collected and still voted their conscience, but then that's what it is. So a takeaway there really was that song, Ojutiowo, shame to money. And I think this should really send some powerful signal to the political class that the people cannot be taken for granted. And I guess maybe the last general point I would like to make as far as the result was concerned is the fact that obviously performance counts for the people when it comes to elections. And because that was the major thing on the lips of people to say that, well, maybe in our community, we never had a good major role for 20 years. And now, yes.
Yeah. We really have very limited time for this conversation. Yeah, we spoke to the Accord Party. He said they didn't pay, they didn't buy votes. If we bring the APC and ADC here, they would say the same thing, that they didn't buy votes, they didn't sell votes or buy votes. So who did the banning and who did the paying? That's my question, because
maybe
because you were on ground, Mr. Robundade. You were on ground.
There was exchange of money, and it's not every time that you witness this thing physically. Don't forget that we're at the age of what do you call it, transfer of money and so on. So that there was no vote buying or vote trading. I think they should that would be a tale for the Marines. I mean, that's really not true. But the point really for me is that was not a significant factor in the outcome of this election. The significant factor was that the people felt that, look, this is not about money, it's about the fact that we want to vote according to our conscience because we believe this person has done this and has done that. That for me, it is really.
And that's where I want to trail this morning in relation to the expression of determination coming from the opposition parties who have seen this as, as something to replicate in the 2027 elections. We had to caution, our last guest who said if people want to be killed, then they will be killed because of what they have seen play out in Osun State, where the people demonstrated an unusual resolve to protect their votes. And I say this against the backdrop of what played out in the 2023 presidential election, where in some areas that votes would go a certain way, security operatives were deployed to intimidate the people such that they did not stay and guard their votes. From the standpoint of an election observer, are you worried for what may occur in 2027 in relation to how the people want to vote and what perhaps the establishment want to be the outcome?
Well, every contestant in an election, wants to win, whether they are in government, or not, and obviously being in government will be seen, as an advantage. And the idea of voter suppression, because that's why I'm saying that no matter how much we celebrate this Osun election, we need to call out some unbecoming acts. A senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria openly saying that there should be killings or there should be reprisal killings. And even on election day, saying that they should check where people are voting so that they will know those who are not voting right. This kind of, and then you relate that to the level of security deployment, because these are some of the electoral functions of the security agencies, the protection of the vote, the secrecy, of the ballot. And I think in terms of the interference of, political actors, this is one area where I think maybe the security agents, maybe their hands are tied. I can't really say. And one of the things that the CP elections commissioner placed at Typho said, for example, was that those who have no business, those who have no business in the Osun election should not be in the state. But we saw, what really happened. Except they can say, well, they had political, interest, but you had all these governors and all of them, being in the state. And indeed, I now realize that the kind of security tension was mainly because of all these VIPs. Their outriders, the sirens blowing, giving an atmosphere of something was going to happen. So when it comes to election, I think one area where we need more pressure and not just engagement is in terms of the impartiality of the security agencies. It's very, very important. Again, it was a factor in Osun State. Remember, before the election, even at the town hall that the civil society network on electoral integrity held, the citizens came out and complained about the conduct of the commissioner of police in the state. So it became an issue. They kept emphasizing the fact that the police in the state was not neutral until the government now said, look, we're going to have a commissioner of police that will be in charge of the elections. So don't worry, even if you have issues with the commissioner of police in the state, that engagement needs to continue. And for me, what this should be for everybody, either state government, particularly the federal government, is that when things go well, you get the credit, even if you have partisan interest in the process. I've seen people comment, for Tinubu and every other thing. So the fact that, for example, you had problems with local government allocation to Osun State, and intimidation, rivalry between APC, because the process has been adjudged as free, as fair, and reflecting the wishes of the people. He is getting credit. The federal government is getting credit. Everybody is getting credit. So it's only in the enlightened interest of those in power to understand that, look, it's all about progress, because everything we do today will be a template for tomorrow.
All right.
If you interfere, use security agents, the person that will take over, they will have justification. They will tell you, oh, this other person did it. So why are you now complaining?
Right, let's as we to wind up. My apologies, got the time. I just need to squeeze in this question as we wrap up. And if you can answer it in 30 seconds, I should say.
30 seconds.
Yeah, I know I called your attention and everyone's attention, and Yaga even made a release. At 6 p.m. or so, we had almost 7 p.m. We've had, that's less than 5 hours after the polling closed, we had about almost 70% of the results uploaded. But from 8:42 p.m. till I think about past 10 or so, we didn't see any result uploaded. And I did ask, I said, has INEC provided an explanation? Because these are the things that affect confidence of people and trigger anxiety. Was there any response from INEC?
Well, there's been no response so far, and I guess INEC itself will still come out with its own statements or its own assessment of how this election went, and we're going to be looking forward to an explanation for that, and we're using this opportunity to demand for that explanation, because it's very, very important. This is just one state. This is just a state election. A general election that could make a whole lot of difference. Given the background of 2023. So we will be asking that question, and we expect INEC itself to provide an explanation. The point I made earlier is that anytime you have such gap in uploading, you have to come out with a statement. Election is a 24/7 thing. People virtually didn't sleep. So we haven't really gotten an answer to that, although I can check. I would say probably not from my own point of view.
All right, Mr. Arobinade, thank you so much. We expect INEC to give us that explanation, because the speed at which upload was happening was super impressive until 8:42 p.m.
Yes, it was super impressive.
Well, then suddenly they made us everybody started thinking about funny things, and it's not good for their reputation.
But we also had a lot of network challenges in Osun State.
At least let them explain. Let them explain to us.
Yes, let them. I'm not holding.
Keeping quiet is not good.
They need to. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Larry Arogo, that is the Executive Director of the National Press Center. Thank you, sir, for coming on the program.
Thank you.